What if I told you that the ultimate endpoint of human evolution, like past achieving world peace, past eradicating disease, even past total spiritual enlightenment, is basically just, well, goofing off.
I mean, that sounds completely counterintuitive, right? Like a joke.
Right. But today, we are looking at a text that claims exactly that. It says the most spiritually advanced beings in the entire universe have absolutely zero responsibilities.
Wow.
Yeah, their only defining characteristic is just this absolute freedom to play. We're doing a deep dive today into an article called The Classification and Realms of Celestials.
Right, written by Sifeng.
Exactly. Written by an author named Shufeng in Harar, Zimbabwe, back in 2005. And the mission for you, the listener, today is to kind of map out this absolutely wild, multi-layered taxonomy of human potential.
Yeah, and I think what's fascinating here is it's important to frame this for the listener right up front. We aren't, validating these claims or endorsing this spiritual hierarchy as absolute truths.
Right, because it makes some pretty intense judgments.
Exactly. It ranks real-world religious figures and makes stark claims. We are simply mapping out the highly specific, deeply fascinating worldview this author has constructed. It's a text that blends ancient Eastern philosophy, literal maps of higher dimensions, and some pretty harsh observations on human ignorance.
Harsh is definitely the word. So to get into that worldview, Shifeng asks us to picture a massive, overgrown wild garden.
Okay, a garden.
Yeah, if you just glance at it, it's just this wall of green, right?
Right.
But if you look closely, the variation is staggering. Some plants are in full bloom, bearing these incredibly sweet fruits. Others bear fruit, but it's, entirely sour.
Like lemons or crab apples.
Yeah, exactly. Some have these massive deep root systems, while others have shallow roots and barely any leaves. It is this dizzying variety of life, all growing in the exact same soil.
And he's using this as a metaphor for us, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
The author argues that humanity is exactly like that garden. From the outside, we look roughly the same, 2 arms, 2 legs, but internally the variation is just astronomical.
And he argues that you can only really see this vast internal diversity if you are able to traverse what he calls the 36-dimensional spaces.
36. That's a lot of dimensions.
It is. But the text asks us to reserve our immediate skepticism. The author uses this classic Taoist analogy of a frog sitting at the bottom of a well.
Ooh, I've heard this one.
Yeah. So just because the frog can only see a tiny circle of blue sky, that doesn't mean the vast atmosphere isn't out there.
Right.
So if we deny the infinite levels of life just because of our own, constrained 3-dimensional perspective, the text argues that we are essentially acting out of foolishness.
And that brings us to the starting line of this whole spiritual hierarchy, like the baseline of humanity. The author makes this incredibly bold, unvarnished claim. He says 99% of humanity lives in ignorance and foolishness.
Yeah, it's a very heavy way to start.
Right. He goes even further, saying 95% of people have closed hearts and remain totally unconscious in their awareness. Basically that we are entirely asleep at the wheel of our own existence.
It is a striking, almost, abrasive set of numbers.
Oh, absolutely.
To illustrate this state of being asleep, the text actually pulls in a reference to Jesus, which creates this really interesting intersection of philosophical traditions.
Yeah, the broad road versus the narrow gate.
Right, exactly. The author mentions the broad road as the path of worldly pursuits, chasing money, status, physical comfort. It is the path that the vast majority of the masses walk.
Makes sense. That's what society pushes us towards.
Right. And the text states quite bluntly that this road leads to death, both physically and spiritually.
While true life, and the author spells life in all capital letters in the text, is only found by those who squeeze through the narrow gate and hike this incredibly rugged trail.
It's not easy.
Not at all. But I have to ask, is this meant to be elitist? Like, to say 99% of us are foolish is a heavy, almost condemning way to start a spiritual manual and feels a bit exclusionary.
I get why it feels that way, but it reads less like an elitist condemnation and more like an intense diagnostic assessment.
Okay, a diagnosis.
Yeah. The author is setting up the premise that attaining a higher state of being requires a radical departure from our biological defaults. The text points out that different cultures have approached this departure differently, but asserts that the Chinese nation is unique in having produced these great hermits.
Right, the hermit, yeah.
Yeah, who operate on a level beyond conventional worldly success, even beyond something like Western Nobel laureates.
That comparison to Nobel laureates is where the text introduces a completely different metric for human achievement.
Totally different scale.
Yeah. The author claims these hermits surpass brilliant scientists because they understand the mechanics of the unseen. He specifically lists their understanding of meridians, the unity of heaven and man, and this progression of refining essence into energy, spirit, and emptiness.
Which sounds very esoteric.
It does. Okay,
Yeah.
let's unpack this, because refining essence into energy sounds literally like alchemy. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, we can think of it like the changing states of matter. In Taoist internal alchemy, essence is your basic physical biological fuel, like your hormones, your bodily fluids.
The raw material.
Exactly. Refining it means converting that raw physical material into energy, which is vitality or life force. It's like melting ice into water.
Okay, ice to water. I follow.
Then you refine that energy into spirit, which is pure consciousness, like boiling the water into steam.
Nice.
Finally, spirit is refined into emptiness, where consciousness expands until it merges with the boundless universe. Basically like steam dissipating until it becomes one with the atmosphere.
Wow. So it is a literal transmutation of the self, moving from dense matter to pure potential.
Exactly.
And the author claims to have traversed those 36 spaces, only to find that these past hermits had already mapped the territory. He provides an exact quote from one of these sages that serves as the roadmap for the rest of our deep dive.
Right, the 5 realms.
Yeah, this quote outlines 5 specific celestial realms. It goes ghost celestials, human celestials, land celestials, deity celestials, and super celestials.
And this hierarchy is rigorously causal.
How so?
Well, since the text established that baseline humanity is deeply attached to the dense material world, the logical first step in this taxonomy explores what happens when those attached people are violently or suddenly separated from their physical bodies.
Which brings us to the ghost celestials, the unseen but tethered. The source material places them in the 5th dimension.
The 5th dimension.
Yeah. Now, the text defines this 5th dimension specifically as the space between the yin and yang spaces.
Okay, the space between.
Right. So if yang is the bright, dense, material world of the living, and yin is the ethereal, subtle world of spirits, the 5th dimension is the membrane between them. To humans, ghost celestials are totally formless.
But not to themselves.
Exactly. The text makes a crucial point about their subjective experience. They don't feel formless at all.
And the text draws a really compelling parallel here to near-death experiences. The author points out that when people experience temporary clinical death, they often report floating above the room.
Right. You hear those stories all the time.
Yeah. They can clearly see their own physical forms on the operating table, but in their spiritual body, they still feel like they have all their facial features, their limbs, even their clothes.
That is so wild.
Their consciousness still operates under the rules of physical geometry, even though they lack actual physical mass.
So the formlessness is only relative to our human, 3-dimensional vision. To the ghost celestial themselves, they're as solid as ever. But who exactly ends up stuck in this membrane between worlds?
It's specific groups of people.
Yeah, the author says it's people who die unexpectedly in the prime of life, people with deeply unresolved grievances, or those who simply dwell incessantly in obsessive thoughts.
Because they are entirely unprepared for the transition. Because their focus was entirely on the broad road of material attachments, their wishes remain unfulfilled. Their desires act as heavy anchors.
Dragging them down.
Exactly. Without a physical body to act out those desires, their spiritual bodies are just dragged around by the weight of their obsession, wandering aimlessly.
It sounds exactly like being stuck in an airport terminal between flights.
That's a great way to look at it.
Right. Your old flight took off without you, but you are refusing to board the new one because you are desperately trying to drag this overweight suitcase onto the plane, and security just won't let you. So you just wander the concourse.
Yes. And imagine that airport terminal is layered right on top of our everyday reality. You are walking through the concourse, but the concourse occupies the same physical space as the living world.
Oh, that's creepy.
Well, the text claims that some cases of what we perceive as spirit possession or hauntings are simply caused by these lingering, confused souls trying to interact with the physical environment they no longer have the tools to manipulate.
But the author is actually quick to demystify this, making it much less like a horror movie.
Right.
He says ghost celestials are basically what we just call ghosts, and they operate on a strict system of cause and effect. There is this incredibly comforting rule in the source text. He says, If you have done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear from ghosts knocking at your door.
Which implies a deeply rational, orderly universe. These entities aren't monsters, they're just trapped consciousnesses.
Just stuck.
Yeah. And the text offers very practical advice here. Because ghost celestials don't actually want to linger forever in this frustrated state, the author suggests treating the deceased with profound kindness.
Oh, like offering comfort.
Exactly. Offering comfort, burning paper money, and speaking words of reassurance are all practical mechanisms to help them release their anchors so they can finally move on to reincarnation.
Okay, so if the baseline is being completely shackled to material desires, even after death, what does the opposite look like? Like, how do you break the tether while you are still alive?
That naturally leads us up the ladder.
Right, to the next two levels, human and land celestials. They represent mastering the mortal world through radical detachment. The human celestials are described essentially as saints living in the mortal world.
But they do not possess what we would call superpowers.
Oh, they don't.
No. Their defining power is an extreme, profound psychological detachment. They have completely seen through the illusions of the mortal world and understand the underlying principles of existence.
Ah, okay. So nations, ethnicities, political parties, wealth, fame. The text says all of that is just fleeting clouds to them.
Just background noise.
Yeah. They practice wu-wei, which is the ancient concept of non-action. They don't force outcomes or manipulate people. They act in accordance with their intrinsic nature and seize opportunities naturally as they arise.
For a human celestial, success isn't accumulation, it is shedding.
Shedding layers.
Exactly. They don't seek to bind others to their will, and they refuse to be bound by the expectations of society. They might enjoy the company of kindred spirits, but they generally avoid worldly people.
Why avoid them?
Because the energetic transaction of anxiety and desire just isn't relevant to their frequency anymore.
That makes total sense. So, human celestials achieve total mental peace, but they still inhabit fragile human bodies that eventually age and die. Does the author offer a solution to biological decay?
He does, and that is where the physiological mastery of the land celestial comes in.
Okay, land celestials.
These beings do have superpowers. They have profound mastery of Taoist arts, and the text claims they are completely immune to hunger, thirst, heat, and cold.
Wait, immune to all of that?
Yep, they have attained absolute mastery over life and death.
I mean, I'd imagine mastering the physical body to that degree requires some intense, ultra-marathon level physical regimen, or like extreme dietary biohacking.
You might assume that, but the author argues the exact opposite. It isn't about pushing the body to its physical limits. It's about profound, absolute stillness.
Stillness, really?
Yes. The source material places a massive focus on this concept for health preservation, quoting ancient texts that say, "All things are exhausted by movement and nourished by stillness."
Okay, so movement breeds confusion. Stillness breeds wisdom. Let's look at the mechanics of that. The text goes as far as to say, "It is the spirit that gives me life. It is the mind that brings me death." By mind, he means the chattering, anxious, constantly analyzing human intellect.
Exactly. We can understand this through the Taoist concept of energy conservation. Think of the human body like a car engine.
Okay, a car engine.
The anxious, chattering mind is like revving that engine constantly while the car is just sitting in neutral.
Oh, wow.
You aren't going anywhere, but you are burning through your fuel, your essence, and causing immense wear and tear on the machinery. Achieving the physical mastery of a land celestial requires you to turn the engine completely off.
To achieve that, the text actually outlines 8 steps of cultivating stillness, like not giving rise to anger, being moderate in desires, abstaining from killing, and benefiting others.
Behavioral step.
Right. But those behavioral rules are paired with 8 mind methods, which are entirely internal directives. The list includes things like calm the mind, correct the mind, humble the mind, but the one that really stands out is stop the mind.
And stopping the mind is the ultimate mechanism of preservation.
How does that even work?
If you can actually halt the relentless generation of thoughts, you stop burning the internal fuel. You achieve a state of thermodynamic equilibrium within your own biology, where your physical body is no longer subject to the friction of time and the elements.
Okay, but pause for a second. Let's look at where we are. We just went from a very grounded, almost stoic philosophy of detaching from wealth to discussing how stopping your thoughts prevents biological aging.
It's quite a jump.
It is a significant leap. But the hierarchy doesn't stop there. Once a being has mastered life, death, and the physical limitations of the earthly realm, where else is there to go?
Only one place.
Right. To progress further, you have to break the laws of physics entirely. Does the author recognize how massive a genre shift this is? Because we are about to jump from philosophy into literal sci-fi.
The author is entirely uncompromising about this transition. He introduces the deity celestials, who represent a total break from human society and physical reality.
Deity celestials.
According to the text, deity celestials traverse space-time tunnels at will. They possess divine abilities and are capable of limitless physical transformations.
The text actually points to Sun Wukong, the Monkey King from the mythological epic Journey to the West. Like, Sun Wukong has 72 transformations, he rides clouds, and a single somersault carries him 54,000 kilometers.
But the vital distinction here is that the author insists this is not a myth.
Wait, really?
Yes. He explicitly states that these abilities represent a real, achievable state of physics-breaking enlightenment. The deity celestials have no fixed abode. The author describes them as having the ability to shrink down to the size of a subatomic particle to enter the molecular world.
Or expand to become as massive as a mountain. He literally says they can kick celestial bodies kicking planets.
Yeah.
As if it were mere balls.
It's mind-bending.
It is. But he admits you aren't going to find the instruction manual for this at your local library. The secrets to cultivating into a deity celestial aren't written in human history books.
Right.
The source says such secrets can only be grasped through innate wisdom and deep enlightenment. It transcends language entirely.
And yet, even the deity celestials, manipulating the fabric of space and time, are not the pinnacle of this taxonomy. There is one final realm.
One more above planet kicking.
The super celestials.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The absolute peak of life. The source material states their base is on the Celestial Islands continent of the Elysium world.
Elysium world.
Yeah, it names specific beings here. Yua, the master of Snow Peak Island, the revered Guanyin Bodhisattva, and even Western angels.
The text makes a highly specific philosophical distinction at this ultimate level. It states that a super celestial is essentially a Buddha, but with a fundamental difference regarding duty.
A difference in duty.
Yes. In many traditions, Buddhas still bear certain constraints, right? They have cosmic responsibilities to alleviate suffering and guide sentient beings toward enlightenment.
Right, they stick around to help. But super celestials have zero duties, zero responsibilities. The defining characteristic of a super celestial is the absolute, unadulterated freedom to indulge in joy.
Just pure joy.
The text literally says how to play and have fun is their greatest feature.
It presents an astonishing paradox, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
To reach this state, you have to undergo lifetimes of grueling spiritual work. You practice extreme discipline, detach from all worldly pleasures, shed every ounce of your ego, master the biological decay of your physical body, and navigate the molecular structure of the universe.
All of that unfathomable effort, just to reach a final state where your only job is to play. It's like the ultimate goal of being incredibly serious is to earn the right to become entirely unserious.
It really is. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this text completely flips our conventional worldly understanding of success.
Oh, completely.
In our daily lives, within that 99% of sleeping humanity, we define success as the accumulation of power, knowledge, wealth, or influence. But in this framework, ultimate success is the complete and total shedding of burden.
Right.
The highest state of existence isn't ruling the universe or managing its complexities. It's enjoying the universe without a single constraint.
And Xie Feng, the author, seems totally self-aware about how completely wild this all sounds to a modern reader.
He has to know.
He does. Near the end of the text, he writes a disclaimer. He warns the reader that the higher the level of wisdom being described, the more mythical and absurd it appears to the uninitiated mind.
Makes sense.
He knows that human celestials practicing non-action makes logical sense to us, but he admits that the super-celestial realm playing in the Elysium world registers as pure fantasy.
He acknowledges that the more he attempts to explain these highest dimensions, the more elusive they become. He explicitly says that to the unenlightened, his explanations probably sound like incoherent rambling or fabricated illusions.
Incoherent rambling.
Yeah, because it's the inherent limitation of trying to explain the physics of a 36-dimensional reality using the crude tools of three-dimensional human language.
He says we assumed it's all fabricated fantasies conjured out of thin air simply because our brains lack the hardware to process the imagery. The text closes with a powerful proverb: the enlightened see the essence, while the unenlightened watch the spectacle.
That's a profound way to end it.
He's basically telling the reader, I can draw you the map of the territory, but I cannot force you to comprehend the landscape.
It demands a fundamental shift from passive observation, just, watching the spectacle of life, to active, profound comprehension. The author finishes by stating that he cannot simply instantly reveal the secrets of enlightenment to the reader and magically elevate them. As he puts it, that's simply out of the question. The arduous work of shedding attachments has to be done by the individual.
We started out looking at that wild garden, the sweet fruits, the deep roots, the staggering variety of human potential hidden beneath the surface of our everyday lives.
So much variation.
From the wandering, tethered ghost celestials dragging their heavy luggage through the terminal, to the perfectly detached human celestials, to the physically immortal land celestials stopping their minds, all the way up to the planet-kicking deity celestials and the absolutely free, endlessly playing super celestials.
It is a breathtaking taxonomy, and it challenges us to look closely at our own lives. It asks us to identify where our deepest attachments lie, and forces us to consider what might happen if we actually began the arduous, terrifying process of letting them go.
Which brings me to a final thought for you, the listener, as we wrap up this deep dive. If the highest levels of existence are entirely beyond human imagination, as this text repeatedly claims, what if our sheer inability to conceive of these realms is exactly the mechanism that keeps us trapped in that 99% of sleeping humanity?
That's a great question.
What if the limits of your reality are simply defined by the limits of your imagination? If you refuse to believe in the hidden depth of the garden, you might just be ensuring you never get to taste the sweetest fruit. Keep exploring the depths, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.